please give a warm welcome to the stage, Ed Barton.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Ed Barton. I work for Caretta Research. At Caretta, we focus very much on the technology industry, specifically buying and selling technology. We do a lot of work in the media technology industry. And today, I'm going to share with you some thoughts around how we believe pay TV operators can leverage architecture and technology to ensure that they survive during what is, without a doubt, perhaps the most unprecedentedly brutal period of competition for both premium TV and video. We obviously believe, as most of us have, that pay TV is in pretty serious trouble. It has been for at least a decade or so. We think that those competitive pressures are really sharpening to make a particularly intense competitive situation. There are going to be less pay TV operators in the 2030s than there are now. And we think the trick is, how do you make sure you're one of those that still stays in the business of charging people to watch television? So the title is around, what does a winning pay TV architecture look like? To kind of answer that literally, we would be sharing those incredibly complicated diagrams with arrows everywhere and little boxes. I'm not sure that would make for a particularly engaging presentation. So what I'm going to share with you is sort of a smushing together of a lot of the work that we've done with buyers at pay TV operators. We work on procurement processes for pay TV operators. We help them decide some of the strategic challenges they have between should I buy this from a vendor or should I build this? And how is that going to translate into tangible business outcomes? We think that there's one of a perfectly number of very natural responses to the competitive pressures that pay TV has faced. Well, everyone went into aggregation, a very, very natural strategic response. Everyone's watching streamers. Let's get them onto our box and ensure that our audiences can access these services through ourselves. And lots of pay TV operators started using Android TV operator tier to do this. And again, a very natural response. Android TV OT makes it very easy and quick to deploy and aggregate third-party video streaming services. The trouble is everyone did this, and now we think that there are a lot of pay TV operators who are struggling for differentiation. They aggregated the same streamers, their UIs look broadly similar, and what has differentiation been reduced to? It's been reduced to exclusive content, specifically live sports, a very, very expensive way for most pay TV operators to stay relevant. We also have some concerns, which we share with the buyers, around the quality and the depth of that aggregation. Aggregation itself started many years ago when Netflix started sticking their app onto cable boxes. Of course, aggregation now reaches into many other areas of the customer experience, from not having to call a customer service center, from not having to fill in a form, from not having to get your credit card out, integrating into many parts of an operator's technology stack. But we think that there's still a little way to go into making that a really consistent and high-quality experience. As if things weren't bad enough already, we now have device manufacturers, we have the smart TV manufacturers who are presenting those same streaming services without having to get a pay TV subscription. Smart TV manufacturers went heavily into FAST, so now you've got a linear experience at the front end of the streaming experience as well, offered by the smart TV manufacturers. This is a very, very difficult competitive situation to find oneself in. So another strategy that we see a number of pay TV operators going into is another perfectly natural response, we think. Why don't we get rid of the set-top box? There's no inherent value in a set-top box. Like a games console, the device's value is purely contingent on the content experience it enables. We see Sky, in particular, moving to what we'd call a managed TV strategy. So, so if we get onto the TV, but it's Samsung or LG's or Sony's, they've got control of the UI. We're just another app with many others. So why don't we start managing the entire television set? And of course, there is also, let's just focus more on the app-based experience. The trouble with the app-based experience is offering the same level of an aggregated experience that you can on the set-top box. App within an app is perfectly possible on a technical level. However, it's the commercial barriers that are stopping a pay TV operator from offering those third-party aggregated streaming services within an app that is stopping that really happening. But the commercial situation may well get sorted out. And we see, I think there's Tata Play Binge in India, which is sort of playing around with an app within an app model, which we think is quite interesting. And that might be one direction in which we see pay TV operators going as we head into the late 2020s and 2030s. So a few thoughts on how we think pay TV can address this problem going forward. There's no magic bullet. There's no one-size-fits-all type approach to this. Again, I'm relating what we hear from the industry. This is not necessarily my analysis. We very much believe in elevating the voice of the buyer. We think it's a very successful strategy for vendors to adopt when they're trying to engage with this segment. We think there are a number of things which we hear really need fixing around the provision of technology to pay TV operators. First of all, I think there's a big opportunity for vendors in enabling other pay TV operators to adopt the Sky-class strategy of managing the TV set. A white label OS, you can just go into Shenzhen and speak to Hisense or TCL and say, let me stick an OS on this TV, let me manage the device, let me pile it high in supermarkets, $250 for a 55-inch panel, and we control the device, the customer journey, the user experience, the user interface. And we can offer an aggregated experience through that. We also think that the partners of pay TV operators themselves, the streamers, the digital services who would like to get into an aggregated environment, need to work a little bit harder to make the process of being aggregated and being upselled through someone else's UI a lot smoother and more consistent than it currently is. We also notice a lot of complaints, a lot of struggles, a lot of pressures around addressing a number of data-oriented challenges that pay TV operators are struggling with. And this is something that's been going on for about a decade now. But it's around analytics, it's around ad tech, it's around maximizing the value of first-party data, which should be an area where pay TV service providers absolutely rule the roost in. And we see very little evidence of most pay TV operators really getting the most out of the data that they have through the household subscription relationship, and critically through the enormous amount of activity and consumption and spending that is taking place on the devices that they address and the apps that they offer. AI, we think there's been a huge amount of discussion, a lot of hype, some really exciting marketing from the vendor community around the potential impacts of AI, but when we speak to some of the customers who have actually tried to experiment, test, and deploy these things, when the rubber hits the road, there's been a bit of disappointment. There's like, can we really justify the cost of deploying this, of ripping up our existing workflows, of changing the way that we are working with this particular type of technology? So I think I'd sort of round things off by saying, pay TV is not going to win or lose on technology or architecture alone. It's about content. It's about, critically, the cost of accessing pay TV. It's about the experience that it offers through its apps and through its devices. And I think the challenge there is, how can we enable technology to give them the best chance to offer both the best customer experience, to do it at the lowest cost possible, to enable them to make the investment into content that is going to help them win, and to offer a customer experience that you can't get from one of the giant streaming platforms or from a standalone app for a digital service such as a fitness or home security type application. One sort of technical thing we'll say, and we've seen a number of pay TV operators doing this already, is the importance of moving to a single platform architecture away from the traditional head end for TV and a separate architecture for streaming, which seems to introduce a whole bunch of complexity and cost into their entire stack. With a single integrated platform, you can expand into new markets and new devices much more cost efficiently. You have a single stack to address for your analytics, a single data set for your advertising, critically one workflow for your main monetization options, including, of course, subscription and transactional upsell. And also it makes it much easier to apply consistency and quality over the aggregated experience. We also think that search, personalization, and recommendation areas we hear a lot of discussion about, a lot of money being spent, a lot of experimentation taking place. And I think this is all about improving how one's infrastructure handles metadata, in particular the integration of the metadata of third-party services into your own, and how you use that to drive things like search, discovery, and personalization. And again, if you're relying on someone else to do it for you, then you will not differentiate yourselves from the quality of what they're offering you and the other people that they are engaging with in the market. And again, we've started seeing pay TV operators kind of get into, well, there are lots of other digital services out there. There are fitness apps, there are music apps, which seems to work quite well. Quite often the best audio speakers in a household are actually through the television with the advent of soundbars. We see interesting stuff happening around home security and a number of other sort of broadband-related services besides. And again, a huge amount of inconsistency and a huge variation in the level of quality regarding how these apps are actually offered, surfaced for discoverability, and the customer journey in how those services are upsold to them, which should be a lot easier. And I think I would just kind of round off by saying, we think that, that we need pretty drastic action here. When we talk to pay TV operators, we constantly see them benchmarking against other pay TV operators. And we're like, you should be benchmarking against the people who are really eating your lunch. There's mobile streaming apps, there's social networks who are taking up a huge amount of the consumption. Like, why aren't you looking at them and benchmarking yourselves against them and adopting some of the technology practices that they do? Again, there is also, I would highlight one final thing, which is a potential branding issue. We always say the Conservative Party is never going to win an election in Scotland if it calls itself the Conservative Party. If we think about what Foxtel in Australia has recently done with a very, I haven't experienced it myself, but it looks from the outside like a very tightly integrated streaming focused platform. It's called it Hubble, and at their launch event, they barely mentioned the brand Foxtel as well. So I think there are some other issues around presentation and go-to-market, which might well help mitigate the possibility of going out of business before it's 2030. So it's not a particularly gloomy, it's a pretty gloomy picture that I'm painting, but I think it's important to be realistic. We've been talking about it for bloody years, and still we think most pay TV operators haven't really done enough to make sure that they're going to still be around. There weren't many slides, but if you'd like a copy of them, feel free to use the QR code. Thank you very much.